1942 to 1944. An Assassin and the Doctors. Biographers of great men seldom refer to the medical reports of the doctors who have attended them. A man's ailments are a powerful influence on both his judgments and his acts. His medical history should therefore be considered chronologically, alongside the record of his work. If one is to comprehend the circumstances behind all that he does, this study is sometimes impossible with Muhammad Ali Jinnah because of the lack of early records and because he was impatient with ill health, his own or anyone else's. Also, he seemed reluctant to confide in his doctors. As early as 1941, Jinnah was reported in the newspapers to be unwell. Major Gardiner wrote to him, proposing a diet that would have been more acceptable to Gandhi. He suggested milk is the best food in the world, but it must be unpasteurized and unboiled. Next, eggs, raw if you can bear them, whipped into some milk, and finally lots of fresh fruit and vegetables. Jinnah answered on 3rd May, "It is very kind of you. There is nothing serious the matter with me. It is entirely due to overwork. I intend to have a complete rest in peace, which is the only prescription for my case." But it was not in Jinnah's nature to rest, and he worked on. When Sir Evelyn Branch talked to him in Bombay in 1942, he asked the Quaid about his chief recreations, what he did to forget his of his worries. Jinnah answered, "My profession is such that it never allows me time for recreation." Jinnah worked in the small office near the front door of his new house, shut off from his private rooms. The office was accessible to callers. On the floors were his papers in tidy piles. The edges of his desk were his horizon for most of the day and night, except when Liaquat Ali Khan induced him to go out on great speaking tours in the provinces. The force of his convictions gave a peculiar power to his oratory. His raised finger, admonishing or accentuating a point, and the thoughtful use of his monocle compelled big audiences into wonder and agreement, even if they could not understand all the words he used. When the tours were ended, he would return to his desk in memory of the discipline that had begun 50 years before, in the lodging in Russell Road, where the bright lights of Olympia had failed to tempt him to pleasure. As a boy of 16, he had bent over his books to pass his bar examinations in less time than any Indian student before him. The industrious habits endured in the man of 66. He worked out the intricate plans to increase the power of the Muslim League, and he wrote brief, bold notes to his workers all over India, like a general giving orders in the field. He had even created his own newspaper and named it Dawn. It was printed in English and it helped to fight the propaganda of the British and Hindus, who owned 95% of the newspapers in India. Jinnah had always been indifferent to the value or the pleasure of popularity, and his scorn of pressmen had loosened many crisp anecdotes among the newspapers' offices in Bombay. The journalists respected Qaid-e-Azam, but as one of them recalled, he never tried to cajole us. He was the most difficult of all politicians to deal with. He was fastidious and proud with us. He would summon us to his house, but he would never offer us a cup of tea or a cigarette. He was above even such trivial bribery as this. One day in Bombay, at the end of a conference, when Mr. Jinnah was about to leave the room, one of my colleagues asked a question. Back came the reprimand. "The conference is over. You are only wasting time." It was strange that a man who had never employed a press agent and who spurned the favors of journalists should own and direct the policy of a newspaper. But it was significant that Dawn prospered, and that when Pakistan was created, Qaid Azam took his newspaper with him to Karachi where it became the most authentic and important journal in the capital of the new country. The year 1942 was horrible with the lawlessness and infamies so alien to Jinnah's constitutional methods. Nehru had said that, despite the failure of the Cripps mission, the Congress leaders would not embarrass the British war effort. They did not keep their promise. In July, Gandhi warned the British that there was no question of one more chance, and he threatened open rebellion. In August, he inaugurated his Quit India movement. The two Cripps words were sprawled in white paint on many walls in English by his followers. In the same month, the Mahatma spoke before the All India Congress Committee at Bombay. He said, Mr. Jinnah does not seem to believe in the Congress program and in the Congress demand. But I cannot wait till Mr. Jinnah is converted for the immediate consummation of India's freedom. The increasing, ruthless sabotage that follows Gandhi's open rebellion caused Jinnah deep grief. One evening, his secretary went into the office late at night and found his master bent over the desk with his head in his hands. Before him was a small volume of Milton on top of the newspapers he had been reading. Might one imagine that the book was open at the lines, "For what can war but endless war still breed, till truth and right from violence be freed?" By mid August 1942, Mahatma Gandhi, Pandit Nehru, and the other members of the Congress High Command had been imprisoned as a seditious danger to the country. All except Gandhi remained under arrest until the war was over. The Qaid reaped the benefits of his lawful and constitutional ways. He remained at his desk and increased the forces of the Muslim League throughout the country. On the afternoon of 26 July 1943, Jinnah was working alone in his room. A new menace to his plans had arisen during June and early July from the Khaksars, the group of Muslims who had opposed him from the beginning. There had been many letters from them, accusing him of treachery for not aligning the Muslim League with Congress in a united front against the British. Some days there had been as many as 50 telegrams, letters, and postcards condemning him and threatening his life. On 27 June, one of the leading Khaksars had written, "If your ultimate goal is Pakistan, then in order to bring the stage of its attainment nearer, for God's sake arrive at a compromise with Gandhiji. We request you to see immediately Gandhiji in jail. Otherwise, some of us, risking our lives, shall make you the target of our bullets." A few days later, the assassin had been chosen. He was Rafiq Sabir, Mazangawi, a young man, about 30, slim and well built, with shaggy black hair and a pointed beard. Rafiq Sabir arrived in Bombay on 6 July. He got into a tram car with his sparse bedding under his arm and went to a hostel where he registered under a false name. On 24 July, having bought a knife, he did not find the blade sharp enough to his liking. So he went to a knife grinding shop and had the knife sharpened. On Monday, 26 July, Rafiq Sabir walked up to Malabar Hill about 1:15 p.m. when Jinnah had finished his lunch and was already back at his desk. The assassin salamed the watchman at the gate and said he wished to see Quaid-e-Azam. He was taken to the secretary, who explained that Jinnah was very busy. At that moment, he walked into the room. In his evidence at the trial of Rafiq Sabir, Jinnah described the next moments. My whole mind was on my correspondence, and just as I was about to leave the room, in the twinkling of an eye, the accused sprang at me and gave me a blow with his clenched fist on my left jaw. I naturally reeled back a bit when he pulled out a knife from his waist with murderous intent. Rafiq Sabir had raised his huge open knife, but Jinnah caught the man's hand in his and softened the blow. The only damage was a wound on his chin and some cuts on his hand, which were bandaged by his sister. During the struggle that followed, many people appeared, among them Jinnah's chauffeur, who snatched the knife from Rafiq Sabir. The Khaksar was ultimately overpowered, taken to Gaul, tried and sentenced by the British judge to 5 years, rigorous imprisonment. The pathos of the Assassin's Act was revealed when he pleaded that he believed it to be his duty to kill Jinnah because he was a tool in the hands of British imperialism. Jinnah was attended by a doctor. Then he returned to his desk. He wrote to a friend in Quetta, I was subjected to a murderous attack, but thank God that I have escaped with minor injuries. He also telephoned his daughter, still estranged from him and living in another part of Bombay, and said, I am all right. The English newspapers and reviews for these warriors contain few articles about Qaid Azam, perhaps his indifference to publicity and his brusque reception of pressmen discouraged visiting writers who might have sought him out and made him into a very important person. To English readers, one of the first to enjoy the Qaid's confidence was Mr. Beverley Nichols, who wrote a lively, prophetic account of their meeting in his book on India. He called the chapter Dialogue with a Giant. Mr. Nicholas met Qaid Azam on 18 December 1943, 5 months after the attempted assassination. He wrote, the most important man in Asia is 67, tall, thin, and elegant, with a monocle on a grey silk cord, and a stiff white collar which he wears in the hottest weather. He suggests a gentleman of Spain, a diplomat of the old school. One used to see his like sitting in the window of the St. James Club, sipping contravex while he read Le Temps, which he propped against a Queen Anne toast rack stacked with toast Melba. Jinnah leaned over the table, holding his monocle between his busy fingers, and said, the Muslims are a nation. If you grant that, and if you are an honest man, you must grant the principle of Pakistan. Then, the Muslims are a tough people, lean and hardy. If Pakistan means that they will have to be a little tougher, they will not complain. Mr. Nichols then asked him, are the Muslims likely to be richer or poorer under Pakistan? And Jinnah answered, what conceivable reason is there to suppose that the gift of nationality is going to be an economic liability? How any European can get up and say that Pakistan is economically impossible after the Treaty of Versailles is really beyond my comprehension. The great brains who cut Europe into a ridiculous patchwork of conflicting and artificial boundaries are hardly the people to talk economics to us. Mr. Nichols described the difference between Jinnah and the typical Hindu politician as the difference between a surgeon and a witch doctor. A surgeon who you could trust, even though his verdict was harsh. During the talk, Jinnah referred several times to Mahatma Gandhi and his followers. He said, our outlook is not only fundamentally different, but often radically antagonistic to the Hindus. We are different beings. There is nothing in life which links us together. Then, the one thing which keeps the British in India is the false idea of a united India as preached by Gandhi. At this time, Gandhi was still a prisoner in one of the Aga Khan's palaces, where he was able to enjoy all the refreshments of a contemplative man in comfort and peace. But he was 74 years old and ill. So, in May 1944, the government released him. His aim had not changed during his 2 years detention. He still hoped to convert Jinnah to his idea of a united India. And on 17 July, he wrote to him, addressing him as Brother Jinnah. I have not written to you since my release, but today my heart says that I should write to you. We will meet whenever you choose. Don't regard me as the enemy of Islam or of the Muslims of this country. I am the friend and servant of not only yourself, but of the whole world. Do not disappoint me. Jinnah answered from Srinagar in Kashmir, where he was trying to rest. I shall be glad to receive you at my house in Bombay on my return, which will probably be about the middle of August. By that time, I hope that you will have recuperated your health fully and will be returning to Bombay. I would like to say nothing more till we meet. I am very pleased to read in the press that you are making very good progress, and I hope that you will soon be all right. The meeting between the leaders was delayed by illness and doctors. On 22nd August, after an exhausting tour, Jinnah wrote to a friend, I broke down because of the crushing, gushing affection of the people. From the day I started from Srinagar, I had to pay the penalty for having satisfied them to the utmost of my capacity. But I am glad to tell you that I am almost all right and will soon be able to resume my work. In September, Qaid Azam was being treated for an ailment in his lungs, and he sought the advice of two doctors. The first of them enjoyed a unique experience. He treated both Jinnah and Gandhi at the same time. This first doctor recalls Jinnah as a good patient. He has said, as a politician, he kept his distance. Gandhi was unclothed before his disciples. Jinnah was clothed before his disciples. That was the difference between them. Gandhi was an instrument of power. Jinnah was power. He was a cold rationalist in politics, a man with a one track mind, but with great force behind it. That was the fundamental difference between them. The doctor said that Jinnah was potentially kind, but that he had been deeply hurt in his life by the years of poverty in Bombay and by the failure of his marriage. All this, he said, made Jinnah guard himself from his potential kindness. It also made him put up defenses against close personal relationships. The doctor then spoke of Gandhi and Jinnah in terms of their personal cleanliness. He said, Gandhi used to say, cleanliness is not next to godliness, it is godliness. He was scrupulously clean in all his physical habits, yet he would perform dirty work and soil his hands in doing some kindness for the poor. Jinnah was not like that. His cleanliness was a personal mania. He would wash his hands and change his underclothes several times a day, but he did not wish to touch people. It was as if he wished to be immaculate and alone. Jinnah's second doctor was a Parsi, Surgeon Commander Jal Patel, now a consulting physician in Bombay and honorary physician to the President of the Indian Union. He has provided his own, more realistic account of Jinnah's illness at this time. One day, Mr. Jinnah rang me up, sometime in September 1944, and said, I am Mr. Jinnah. I want an appointment. I examined him and found that his blood pressure was about 90. I think he was conducting his difficult meetings with Mahatma Gandhi at that time, working at full pressure. He was frail and weak, and I told him that he needed both rest and tonic. He told me that he had attacks of dysentery in the past, some pain in his chest, and a cough. There were signs in the base of his lungs of unresolved pneumonia. He showed me an X ray picture of his chest. It confirmed my diagnosis. I gave him calcium injections, tonics, and also short wave diathermy treatment. The cough subsided, and he went off to the hills for a rest. He came back, having increased his weight by 18 pounds. The fact got into the newspapers, coupled with my name. I went to Mr. Jinnah and said, some fool has done this. He answered, I was the fool. Why shouldn't I express my gratitude to the man who served me so well?